Great. So I'm Sam Wurzel. I'm one of the founders of Octopart, and Octopart is a search engine for electronic parts. I'm here with Sanket Gupta, who's also with Octopart, and we're going to talk today about the Common Parts Library. So the Common Parts Library is a list of commonly used electronic components for connected device applications. And first, I want to talk a little bit about the history of the Common Parts Library, how it came about, what the inspiration was. We're going to talk about the Common Parts Library for production, and then Sanket's going to speak about the new Common Parts Library for prototyping. So back in the spring of 2014, I was at MakerCon, and I had a conversation with Eric Pan at Seed Studio. And at that time, he was working on something called the Open Parts Library, which is a list of electronic components that was available in his supply chain. And the purpose behind it was to speed up the assembly and manufacturing of electronic products that were being manufactured by Seed. And I thought that this was a really interesting idea because around the same time, I was traveling around to our customers, to contract manufacturers, to hardware startups that were building new hardware devices and trying to get a sense of what their pain points were. And what I heard a lot was that when a product was going into production, oftentimes they would build a PCB, they would send it off to the contract manufacturer, maybe 1,000 pieces, they would order the BOM, and there would be one or two parts that they realized they couldn't get in volume because when they were building the bill of materials and designing the product, they weren't thinking about supply chain issues. They were just thinking about, okay, what part can I use in the prototype? Sure, we'll be able to get it in production. It doesn't really work like that. You have to be thinking about production when you're in the prototyping phase. So in this conversation I was having with Eric, we thought there's an opportunity to create a more broad list of commonly used electronic components that could be applicable to a broader set of devices. And that was the beginning of the Common Parts Library. And so that kicked off an effort at Octopart to develop this list, and really with the two stated goals that I was alluding to before. One is that we want to make the component selection easier. So rather than sifting through the 30 million parts that we have in our database, we can suggest, hey, check out these sensors, check out these connectors, check out these interface ICs. They're widely available in the supply chain, and they're what everybody's already using right now. And then the other piece of it is when you go into manufacturing, you can feel confident that those parts are going to be available in the supply chain at the volumes you're going to need. So we also started working with a bunch of open hardware companies, the logos are below, to help us get that input about what are the right parts to include. And this is really an open collaboration between us, the community, the companies below, and really the entire open hardware community. So that's the history. And we had this idea around April of last year. In September, we launched the Common Parts Library for production. At the time, we didn't call it the Common Parts Library for production. We just called it the Common Parts Library. And it was mostly surface mount components, components that would be useful for going into production. And we got some really great feedback right away, which was that this was good for production, but when you were just designing something, these weren't necessarily the best parts to use. And Sanket's going to speak to that in a bit. But before that, I just want to point out a couple of the features of the CPL for production. So this is one small set of the library, say microcontrollers. On the right-hand side, you see there are these green boxes with a number. That's the number of authorized distributors that sell those parts. And because Octopart, we have relationships with almost all electronic component distributors, we have a great view about what the availability is in the supply chain day to day. And we can use that information to curate the library around parts that are available in the supply chain. And since we launched it in September of last year, we've iterated a couple times, maybe 5 or 6 times, where we've made some slight changes to ensure that there wouldn't be supply chain problems based on our supply chain data. Second important thing I want to point out is our partnership with SnapEDA, which has been working on building out the symbols and footprints for the components. That's to help you get started designing PCBs really quickly. This was another common theme that I hear when I talk to Octoparts users, is that coming up with the symbols and footprints for a variety of design software is a real pain. There's a lot of repeated effort. And with SnapEDA, we've been able to streamline that. And so if you use CPL parts, the process of getting symbols and footprints is going to be pretty easy, and those are licensed under Creative Commons share alike license. So you can use them in commercial products, no problem. Another key innovation, let's say, that we came up with is a concept of a CPL part number. Now, has anybody seen that XKCD comic where you show all these different standards and then you say, okay, I'm gonna solve this by coming up with a new standard, and really now you just have like another problem. Well, the comic says, I should have put the comic on here. Basically, we were very, when we're thinking about coming up with a new set of part numbers, we did it in a very conservative way because we don't want to just put out more part numbers. Really, the common part library part numbers are not part numbers. They're really identifiers that identify a group of parts that are either very close or are actually swap-in replacements. And that way we can identify, you can refer to a 1 microfarad 0602 capacitor in a very easy way. And what we do is we identify a number of manufacturers that make the same part. This is important when you go to manufacturing because it might be the case that one of the manufacturers, their production lines are down and you need to go to a replacement. So that's another key feature of the CPL, is that wherever possible, we find second and sometimes third and fourth sources for all of the components. Like I mentioned before, the common parts library for production is great once you have a design that is ready for production. The feedback that we received from designers, from hardware startups, was that we need help in the prototyping phase. And this is before we're dealing with tiny surface mount components. This is when we're playing around with breadboards and development kits. And that was the inspiration and the impetus for the Common Parts Library for prototyping, which Sanket is going to speak about.
Thanks, Sam, for giving an introduction to CPL for prototyping. So over the last 1 year, we visited many hackathons and talked with many makers. And what we found out was, like, a lot of people have this question that before we go to production and PCB design, they want to do a lot more breadboarding and figuring out like how to try out that idea on a breadboard first. And we heard questions like, what is a good through-hole component? Or what is a good BLE module or Wi-Fi module to use in the project? And you know, a lot of these questions, you'll agree with me, are very open-ended, and there might not be a one simple answer to a lot of these questions. There might be many BLE boards out there which might meet your requirement, but it's just sometimes hard to figure out which one is the best. So, but the good thing is there are a lot of great folks out there who have written amazing content around these parts and who also have great boards in their website. Sites such as Adafruit, SparkFun, I'm sure a lot of people use them here. Yes, almost everyone. So yeah, so Adafruit and SparkFun are doing a great job of making great boards which suit the maker's needs. So, but the thing is, a lot of the content is kind of all over the place, and we wanted to bring the entire wealth of information into one ecosystem. So let's say you want to, I'll show you more examples later, but let's say you are setting up an electronics lab in your school and you're looking for a soldering station. You can come to this CPL for prototyping and find out what goes with soldering, what you might need, and so on and so forth. So we are really excited to present Common Parts Library for prototyping. It is basically, simply put, commonly used through-hole components for prototyping. So what Sam talked about was about the SMD components, all the symbols and footprints. This library is more for breadboarding and using through-hole components. And this library has been expanded to include development boards, platforms, equipment, connectors, switches, anything that you might need to make your prototyping easier. So the goal of this CPL for prototyping is to make prototyping faster and cheaper. So I'm going to give you a few examples of how this might help you in your own project. So the first example is for platforms. And I'm sure you'll also agree with me that you might have had a tough time figuring out what Arduino to get for your project, because there are just a lot of them out there. But the thing is, there are many people out there who have written good content on how to select an Arduino. So over here in this category, you would find links to Arduino, comparison charts, buying guides, and so on. And then you can buy your Arduino. Let's say you got an Arduino Uno for your project. Now you're figuring out, okay, it's cool to do a simple stuff like digital and analog signals, but you want to learn maybe more advanced stuff like I2C communication. So for that, we have some great tutorials here, which you can go in the site and get to them. So same thing goes with Arduino, Raspberry Pi, BeagleBone Black, Texas Instruments Launchpad, and so on. So it's all collected in one place. So if you're looking for a platform for your project, you can come in and figure out what's the best. And you also have great project ideas from sites such as Hackster, Hackaday, Adafruit, Magazine, and so on. The next example is interface boards. And I'm sure this is something which has affected everyone. Whenever you're trying to make a connected product, you're always figuring out what's a good Wi-Fi module to use or what's a good BLE module to use. I'm sure I have struggled a lot with this myself. So in this category, we have collected some popular Wi-Fi modules such as Particle, Electric Imp, and ESP8266, which I'm sure a lot of people have played with. Then you will also find cellular, BLE, GPS, and so on. So it's all collected in one ecosystem. The next example, similar to the interface boards, is test equipment. And this is, again, something which is a big pain point for many people, is what's a good multimeter to get from my lab, or what's the power supply or the oscilloscope. So here you will find like 4 multimeters. It was a very tough decision to choose one of them, but you will find 4 of them here, and they are for different budgets. So if you are free on budget, you could choose the one from Fluke. But if you were like low on budget, you can choose the one from Mastech. And same thing goes with power supply and oscilloscope. Then the last example that I want to use is of headers. And the thing is that it looks very simple, but it can be very complicated to choose a good jumper or a header for your breakout board. And here is a collection of some popular headers that you can use in your project. And this will really speed up your process. These are the kind of things that you should not spend time on. And here, if you come in, you'll just get it, and you can spend time on more complicated and bigger problems that you're trying to solve. So this is Common Parts Library for prototyping, and we are really excited to launch it. And please give us your feedback. We just recently launched a Slack chat room. Please get your invitation, and it's a live chat feature, so you can just come in and talk with us. There are going to be other makers as well there, and we can have a conversation about what should be in the CPL, what should not be there, and if there's any feedback, please give that to us. The most important slide, the link to the library, is octopart.com/CPL. It's really easy to remember. Do check it out and see if you find it useful for your project, and do give us your feedback. You can reach out to us directly at these email addresses, and we look forward to your feedback and talk to you later. Thank you so much.